I keep thinking about my father's hands, not at the end, when they were still and unfamiliar against the white of the hospital sheet. Earlier than that, the way he'd press both palms flat on his desk when he was thinking through something difficult, like he was steadying himself against the surface of the problem. Raymond Calloway was not a man who spoke before he was ready. He'd sit like that, hands flat, eyes somewhere else, and you'd wait because you'd learned that whatever came next was worth the silence. I learned a lot of things by waiting around my father. David didn't have the patience for it. That was never a criticism, just a fact the three of us understood without discussing. David was the one who walked into rooms. I was the one who made sure the rooms were ready. For 22 years, that division felt natural, even comfortable. Dad built the company. David fronted it. I held the parts together that nobody photographed. I thought that meant something. I think I was right. I just didn't understand yet what it meant to my brother. The funeral was a Tuesday in November, cold, without being dramatic about it. The kind of day that just presses down on you. I remember the reception room more clearly than the service itself. The folding tables with the food, nobody was really eating. The particular way grief makes people talk too much or not at all, and how you spend the whole afternoon navigating between both kinds. I shook hands with people I'd known for 15 years, vendors, clients, two men who'd worked the warehouse back when we were still operating out of a single floor on Clement Street. They told me Raymond's stories. I listened. It was the most useful thing I could do. David found me near the window sometime around 2 o'clock. He didn't lead with condolences. We were past that with each other, or so I thought. He reached into his jacket and held out an envelope with the quiet efficiency of someone completing a task they'd been mentally rehearsing. I looked at it for a moment before I took it. Inside was a check, formatted like a business document. My name, a figure, and in the memo line, the word Severance. He leaned close enough that only I would hear. Dad always knew you weren't built for this. I stood there with the envelope in my hand and people moving around us and someone laughing too loudly at something across the room. I folded the envelope once, slid it into my jacket pocket, looked back out the window. I didn't say anything, not because I was being strategic. I genuinely didn't have words available. The feeling wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something closer to the sensation of a floor you'd trusted your whole life, shifting very slightly under your foot. 3 years before that Tuesday, my father called me into his office and closed the door. This was unusual. Raymond operated mostly in the open. His office door was a formality, something for phone calls and accountants. When he closed it deliberately, you paid attention. He didn't sit. He stood by the window with his hands in his pockets and told me he was having some documents prepared. He said he wanted me to know without it becoming a conversation. He said he had reasons he didn't feel the need to explain, and that I should trust the reasons existed even if he never named them. Then he asked me to promise I wouldn't say anything until there was something to say. I promised. We never discussed it again. That was Raymond. He said a thing once if he meant it, and never again because repetition felt to him like doubt. I went back to work, managed the vendor contracts, handled the compliance renewals, kept the machinery running the way I always had. And I kept the promise because he'd asked me to, and because some part of me believed, without evidence, purely on the weight of that closed door, that he'd had a reason. The 3 days after the funeral I spent mostly at home. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call anyone connected to the company. I cooked things that took longer than necessary. I slept in fragments. I found a notepad on my kitchen shelf that had come from Dad's desk at some point. I couldn't remember taking it, and his handwriting was on the top page. A partial list. Hardware suppliers, I think. Something about freight timing. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at it for a long time. David sent one text about the office keys. I replied, "Tomorrow." Patricia Ellison had been my father's attorney for 11 years. She was methodical in the way that makes you feel like every detail has already been accounted for, which is exactly what you want in someone who handles the paperwork of endings. She contacted David to schedule the formal reading. He arrived with his own attorney, which told me everything about his expectations. I arrived alone and sat across the table from both of them. Patricia presented 2 documents. The first was the will. David knew this one. He'd seen a version of it years earlier. The document that gave him operational control of the company, the building, the formal structure. His attorney made a small note. David's posture settled. Then Patricia placed the second document on the table. A shareholder agreement, executed 14 months before Raymond died. Witnessed by Patricia herself and a notary whose stamp was dated on a Thursday afternoon when I had been. I later realized, deliberately kept busy with a vendor call David had forwarded to me, 49% of the company's equity transferred to me, with a clause clearly written, unambiguous, granting me right of first acquisition in any ownership transfer, sale, or dissolution. David had spent 3 days running a company he only partially owned. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Patricia gathered her papers with the calm of someone who had expected exactly this silence. David called at 11:47 that night. I was sitting in the kitchen with the light on, not doing anything in particular. The conversation wasn't what I'd imagined. In the versions I'd run through over the years, he didn't accuse me. He asked quietly why Dad hadn't told him. I said I didn't know, that Raymond had asked me to wait and I had waited. David went silent for a long time. Long enough that I checked once to see if the call had dropped. Then he asked what I wanted. I told him the truth. I said I didn't know yet. We went through Patricia's office. Mediation, formal and slow. Some sessions lasted 2 hours and ended without resolution. Some things were said that I don't think either of us will fully recover from. The company kept operating through all of it. The vendors held, the contracts renewed. The work continued the way work does when the people doing it have no interest in anyone's personal history. My name went back on the letterhead. No announcement, no explanation offered to the staff. It was just there one Monday, the way things are when they've been corrected rather than declared. I still have the severance check. It's in the same envelope in a drawer in my home office. I haven't cashed it. I haven't thrown it away either. I'm not sure what I'm waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just want to keep having the choice.